At exactly 2:03 a.m., his daughter was asleep in the next room when he heard the soft knock, too hesitant for trouble, too late for visitors. Standing in the freezing dark was a barefoot woman, soaked to the bone, trembling under the porch light. She didn't speak at first, just held out a torn piece of paper with his address scribbled on it and a bruise blooming across her jaw. He should have shut the door. But something about the look in her eyes, the fear, the exhaustion, the silent plea made him step aside and say, "Come in." What happened next would unravel secrets, trigger a storm, and change his life forever. Let's begin. The storm had just started when Jacob Warner finished drying the last plate in his cramped kitchen. Rain slashed at the windows like claws, and the wind moaned through the cracks in the old trailer home. He glanced at the clock, 2:03 a.m., too late for peace, too early for answers. He was halfway through turning off the lights when a soft knock echoed through the silence. 3 knocks, slow, uneven, almost apologetic. Jacob paused. Another knock. He moved to the door, cautious but calm. Being a single, Dad in rural Missouri taught him not to panic easily, but also not to open doors blindly. He peeked through the curtain. A woman, alone, soaked from head to toe. No car in sight, no umbrella. Just her, arms wrapped tight around herself, staring at the wooden porch like it was the last solid thing in her world. Jacob opened the door halfway. "You lost." She looked up, her voice barely registered above the rain. "Please, I didn't know where else to go. She stopped, reaching into her coat and pulling out a crumpled note. His address was scrawled on it, his brows furrowed. "Who gave you this?" She looked down. "I don't know his name. I met him at a diner an hour back. Said you were someone who helps people." Jacob's throat tightened, not because of the compliment, but because of the bruise on her cheek and the way her hands trembled like she hadn't been warm in days. He stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated, then nodded once, stepping into the warmth of his home like it was a church. Water dripped from her jeans onto the old hardwood floor. Her shirt clung to her skin. Her eyes scanned the room, flicking quickly toward the hallway. Where his daughter slept, Jacob noticed. "She's asleep," he said gently. "Safe. And you're safe here too. I'm Jacob. You?" She swallowed. "Madeline. Bathroom's down the hall, towels in the closet. Get dry, we'll talk after." Madeline didn't thank him. She just moved like a ghost, like the words had been beaten out of her soul days ago. Jacob watched her go, and in the silence, a cold feeling wrapped around his spine, not fear, but the sharp instinct that letting her in was going to unravel something massive, and he was right, because less than 12 hours later, a black SUV pulled up to his property, and inside was a man with dead eyes and questions that should never be asked in front of children. By the time the black SUV rolled to a stop at the edge of Jacob's gravel driveway, the morning fog hadn't yet lifted. His daughter, Emily, was still curled on the couch with her cereal bowl in her lap, cartoons buzzing faintly from the small screen across the room. Jacob stood at the window, hands clenched around a mug of lukewarm coffee. The SUV's windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but the way the engine idled, low and steady, it wasn't someone lost asking for directions. He felt it in his gut. Madeline had barely spoken a word since last night. She'd dried off, taken the guest blanket, and slept curled up on the couch, her body stiff even in rest. When she woke, she offered a soft, "Thank you," but said little else. Now, she stood behind Jacob, watching over his shoulder. Her breath caught the second she saw the car. "No," she whispered. Jacob turned. "You know them?" She backed away. "I need to go, now, please." Jacob stepped between her and the door. "You're not running, not again." "You don't understand. That car, that man inside, it's not just some stalker. He owns people, lawyers, cops, judges. If he finds me, he already has, Maddie. A door slammed. From the SUV stepped a man in a black coat, tall, broad-shouldered, calm. Not flashy, calculated. He walked up the path like he had a right to every step of land he passed. His shoes barely made a sound on the wet gravel. Jacob opened the door first. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice hard. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I believe you already have. I'm looking for someone. A woman, early 30s, long dark hair, possibly bruised. She's been missing for a few days. Dangerous state of mind, needs medical attention." Jacob didn't blink. "That's unfortunate, but I haven't seen anyone." The man paused, studying Jacob like a bug under glass. "You sure?" Jacob stepped forward slightly. "I'm real sure." Behind the door, Madeline's breath was hitching like she couldn't control the panic anymore. The man gave a tight smile, then slipped a business card into Jacob's hand. "If you do see her, call me. I'd hate for your daughter to witness something unpleasant." That did it. Jacob's jaw clenched. His hand gripped the doorframe until the veins bulged, but he didn't lash out. He just said, "You've got 5 seconds to leave." "My property!" The man studied him for another beat, then nodded and turned back toward the SUV, water splashing around his shoes. When the engine faded into the fog, Madeline collapsed to her knees. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring danger here. He's not just rich, he's untouchable. He used to lock me in a room with no windows for days, said it was for love, that if I ran, he'd burn the world to the ground to find me." Jacob crouched beside her, steady. "You're not alone anymore." Madeline looked up, trembling. "Why are you helping me?" Jacob's voice cracked just slightly. "Because I know what it's like to have no one believe you, to feel like you don't matter unless someone's using you." For the first time, she didn't look like she wanted to vanish. She looked like someone fighting to stay. Jacob helped her up. "We'll figure this out. I don't care who he is. If he wants you, he's going through me." That night he didn't sleep. Neither did Madeline, and neither of them knew that before dawn, the man in the SUV would call someone else. Someone far more dangerous. Someone who didn't knock. It was 4:17 a.m. when the back fence collapsed, not from wind, not from rot, but from something or someone pushing it down with force. Jacob sat upright in his bed, instantly alert. Years of being a single dad had trained his ears to every creak and shift of the house. This wasn't normal. This was wrong. By the time he grabbed the bat from beneath his bed and crossed the hallway, Madeline was already standing in the kitchen, pale, barefoot, gripping a kitchen knife like her life depended on it. "It's him," she said, her voice shaking. Jacob looked through the back window. One of the motion sensor lights had been ripped clean off the wall. The backyard was dark, too dark. "Stay behind me," he ordered. He crept toward the back door, Emily still asleep behind her closed door, unaware that the calm world she knew had just cracked open. Then a silhouette moved. A man stepped through. The darkness like he belonged there. No words, no warning, just presence. He wore black, no coat despite the freezing temperature. His face was emotionless, carved from stone. His hands were gloved, his eyes hollow. Jacob opened the door a crack. "You're trespassing," he said, voice steady. The man didn't answer, just tilted his head slightly, like a predator analyzing. "Pray, I'll call the police," Jacob added, raising the bat. Still no response, until the man said quietly, "That won't help. We are the police." Jacob's stomach dropped. Then the man moved, fast. He was on the porch in 2 strides. Jacob swung the bat hard, catching him in the ribs. But the man didn't groan, didn't flinch. He just grabbed the bat midair and shoved Jacob backward into the doorframe. The wind knocked out of him. Jacob crumpled to one knee, but still scrambled to block the door. The man looked down at him. "Where is she?" Jacob spat blood. "Gone." "You're too late." A lie, but one he had to sell with everything he had. Inside, Madeline crept toward the hallway, ushering Emily into a linen closet. She whispered, "Don't come out unless I open it, okay? No matter what you hear." The little girl's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded bravely. Madeline turned back. Jacob was still standing, barely. The man stepped forward again, but a click stopped him. Madeline stood in the hallway with Jacob's old revolver. Her hands shook, but her aim didn't. "Touch him again," she said, voice trembling, "and I'll empty the whole chamber." The man paused, then slowly he stepped back. He raised his hands, smiled. "You think you've won something tonight?" he murmured. "You've just made it personal." And with that, he turned and walked away into the night. Madeline fell to her knees. Jacob sank beside her. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because they both knew this wasn't over. It had just begun. And in the days that followed, what started as a simple act of kindness would spiral into something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. By sunrise, the house felt like a war zone. Emily was safe, thank God. Still shaken, but Jacob kept her occupied with coloring books and pancakes, though his hands shook with every flip of the spatula. Madeline sat at the kitchen table, staring into her untouched coffee, pale as ash. Her eyes were red but dry. She didn't cry anymore. She'd cried enough for 100 lifetimes. Jacob finally sat across from her. "Talk to me," he said gently. "No more half-truths. Who is he?" She met his eyes. "His name is Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Systems. Publicly, he runs tech and surveillance, private security, AI. But underground, he launders money, traffics influence, owns people, women." Jacob clenched his jaw. "You were one of them." "I was his fiancée," she said bitterly. "He kept me hidden, not just from the public, from his own board. I was a pet, caged, trained. I wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to, smile on command, dress like a trophy." Jacob swallowed, the rage in his throat. "How'd you get away?" Madeline's fingers gripped the mug tighter. "A driver, kindest soul I ever met. He slipped me a burner phone and an address the night Victor had to travel. He whispered, 'If you ever want out, run to this man. He won't ask questions.' That address was yours." Jacob leaned back, stunned. "Who was he?" She exhaled slowly. "Said his name was Ben. You ever know a Ben?" Jacob blinked. "Ben Carter." She nodded fast. "He's dead," Jacob said quietly. "Years ago, we used to work together before he joined private security. He was a good man." A silence hung between them. The weight of it was heavy, haunted. Madeline finally whispered, "He died saving me." Jacob stood. He felt like the air had thickened, like the walls were closing in. "All right, then let's end this. We're not running anymore." Madeline looked up, fear flashing across her face. "What are you talking about?" Jacob grabbed his truck keys. "I know someone in the next town, ex-military, owes me big. If we want to take Victor down, we need leverage, evidence, and protection." "You'd risk your life for me?" she asked, voice cracking. Jacob paused at the door. "No," he said. "I'd risk it for Emily, because the kind of man who shows up in the dark without knocking, he doesn't stop with threats. And if he then comes back, I'm not meeting him with a bat. I'm burning his empire to the ground." That evening, they drove 60 miles north to a man named Travis Dale, former Army intelligence. He lived alone in a cabin packed with computers, wires, and secrets. Travis frowned when he saw Jacob. "Last time you showed up here, you needed a place to hide a stolen carburetor. This looks different." Jacob nodded toward Madeline. "It is." She explained everything: dates, locations, names. Travis's fingers flew across his keyboard. An hour later, he looked up. "You were right," he said grimly. "Victor Hale is dirty, real dirty. I can trace 3 black site properties under shell companies tied to him, but he's protected. Bribed judges, private hackers, clean legal fronts. No one's touched him in over a decade." "Can we change that?" Jacob asked. Travis smirked. "If you're ready to make noise." That night they launched a plan. They traced Victor's communications, tracked his shell companies, set up a data leak using Travis's server, and just when they thought they had enough, Jacob's phone lit up, unknown number. The message read, "Nice try, but you forgot who you're dealing with." Attached, a photo of Emily, at school. Jacob went ice cold. Madeline gasped. "He's watching her." Jacob stood up, every muscle in his body locked with rage. This ends tonight. But what none of them knew was that Victor Hale wasn't just playing a game. He was planning a war. Jacob didn't sleep that night. Neither did Madeline. Travis, hunched over his monitors, with a lit cigarette burning down to the filter, said it first. "If he knows your daughter's location, we have less than 24 hours. Maybe less. He's not just sending threats, he's planning a move." Jacob's voice was like stone. "Then we hit first." They crafted a desperate plan. Victor Hale's weakest link wasn't his money, his power, or his security. It was his arrogance. He believed he was untouchable, that no one would dare stand against him. But he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated a man with nothing left to lose, and a woman who'd already survived the worst of him, while Travis pinged Hale's private servers and planted digital breadcrumbs to stall his next move. Jacob and Madeline prepared for something far more personal. They went back to Jacob's house by dawn. Emily had been picked up an hour earlier by Jacob's trusted neighbor, Clara, an older woman who'd watched Emily like a grandmother since she was a baby. She had no phone, no social media. Safe, hopefully. Jacob stood in the driveway. Rain, soaking his flannel shirt, hands shaking not from fear but fury. "He's coming here," he told Madeline. "I can feel it." And he was right. At 3:41 p.m., two black SUVs turned off the road and crept up the gravel like wolves closing in. Madeline stood at the window with a loaded pistol in one hand and a flash drive in the other. "This has everything," she said. "Every account, every fake identity, every offshore transaction. If we get this into the right hands—" Jacob nodded. "We will." Then the front door burst open. 3 men in black stormed inside. Tactical, silent, trained. But Jacob was ready. He tackled the first, slamming him into the hallway wall, bones crunching. Madeline fired a warning shot into the floor, making the others duck. Travis's hacked floodlights flared outside, blinding the rest of the men as they tried to circle around back. Then Victor Hale himself stepped through the smoke. Not a drop of sweat on him, not a scratch, just that same dead-eyed calm. "Give her back," he said simply, "and I'll let your little girl live." Jacob stepped forward. "You'll never touch her again." Victor smiled slowly. "You're just a mechanic, a nobody. You think your little act of chivalry will matter when I erase your name from every system?" Jacob glanced at Madeline, and then in one sudden, savage motion, he tackled Victor into the fireplace, flames catching onto the silk of Victor's custom coat. Victor screamed as fire licked up his arm. Jacob shouted, "Now!" Madeline ran for the back with the flash drive. She burst into Travis's truck, already connected to a live call with a federal contact Travis had worked with years ago. The files were uploading, every dark secret, every victim's name, every cover-up. Inside, the chaos continued. Victor, still half-burning, staggered out of the house, only to collapse on the wet grass, where Travis kicked the gun from his hand. "You should have stayed in the shadows," Travis growled. 3 weeks later, the headlines were everywhere. Tech tycoon Victor Hale arrested in massive federal raid. Dozens of women identified as trafficking survivors. FBI credit anonymous source for tipping off investigation. Jacob never came forward. Neither did Madeline. They didn't need the spotlight. They just needed peace. 1 year later, Jacob stood on his front porch, coffee in hand, watching Emily race through the yard with her science project, a homemade rocket. Inside, Madeline hummed softly while fixing breakfast. She wore jeans and a white shirt, hair tied up, scars still faint on her cheek but fading. The panic was gone from her eyes now. What was left? Strength. She looked up as Jacob walked in. "I was thinking," she said, handing him a plate. "It's been a year. Maybe it's time we took that road trip Emily keeps asking about." He smiled. "Yeah, let's do it." She leaned into his shoulder. "You ever think about that night I showed up on your doorstep?" "All the time," he whispered. "And every time I do, I thank God I didn't close the door. Because sometimes the most broken moments bring the most beautiful turns. And sometimes a single act of kindness can rewrite an entire life."